Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, Supply Chain Insights, the podcast for your supply chain leader who is on the go and wants to be in the know. And now, your host, Lora Cecere.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. My name is Lora Cecere, and I'm the founder of Supply Chain Insights. And this podcast is designed for the supply chain leader who's on the go but wants to be in the know. And I am currently working on a series called What Would I Tell My 25-Year-Old Self? And in this role, I am interviewing senior leaders to look back and think about when they were 25 and put themselves back in those shoes and reflect back over their career and say, what would I tell my 25-year-old self? Now, today I am interviewing Scot DeGroot, and I met him when I was working at Kimberly Clark almost 2 decades ago. And Scot, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Laura, thank you very much. It's good to be here. I appreciate getting the chance for you and I to catch up again and to talk about this topic.
Yeah. So, Scot, tell the group a little bit about your career.
Yeah, well, let's start at the current situation, and then we'll do a bit of a backward view. I'm currently the managing director of the Global Supply Chain Institute at the University of Tennessee, where I'm also a lecturer. And I've been in this position for about 11 months. Prior to that, I spent 38 years in industry and corporate America, 2 years with Gallo, and then 36 years with Kimberly Clark. And as you say, that's where you and I met. And in my career at Kimberly Clark over 36 years, I started out working in the summer, working in some of our factories in the warehouse and doing the hourly labor that we ask so many of our people to do. My first full-time job was a production planner out in Ogden, Utah, and Kimberly Clark makes diapers in Ogden, Utah. And Laura, here's a great benchmark. On one side of the shelf is the reason I was hired was to run the personal computer that the first one that Kimberly Clark had bought for this site. And it took 5 floppy disks to load the operating system. And my job was to be the materials planner for all the production that was going on at the Ogden site. So that's one bookend. Moved 14 times all over the country, all over the globe. Spent the last 7 years as the vice president of planning and logistics for the company. And in that role, I was accountable for inventory performance, for OTIF and service performance, and all aspects of logistics.
So, Scot, what would you tell your 25-year-old self?
Well, I would say several things, Laura. The first one is be a voracious learner and continue to learn no matter what you achieve or what your team achieves or what your company achieves. This idea that as good as that is, it can always be better. And for me and myself to continually be super curious about, is there a better way to do this? Is there a better approach? What are others doing in this space? What can I do for my own self-development so that I'm continuing to be open-minded to the possibilities? I think, if you don't mind sharing a quick story, there was a time about 15 years into my career where I was promoted to be the head of production planning, all planning, demand supply planning for our Huggies Diapers group. And I thought I was just it was the job everyone aspired to, and I achieved it, and I just was so proud of myself. And I was walking around the building, just thinking I was the king of everything. And I learned quite quickly that I needed to be much more humble in that moment and be open to what was going on around me, and that stuck with me. And that's what I would tell myself: be open to continuously learning.
Be humble.
Yeah, and be humble in this idea that you achieve things only because you work hard and you have a team around you that you motivate to the mission, and that's vital. That's right. I always have this humility. I used to call it this driven humility. Be driven, but from a standpoint of being humble and wanting to learn more and do better.
So did you accomplish being a voracious learner? How do you learn? Did you learn by networking, by conferences, by reading? Different people learn differently. One of the things I learned when I did some organizational development is some people learn through experience, some people learn from listening, some from reading, some from visualization. How do you learn, and how did you navigate your path to become a voracious learner?
Yeah, uh, for me, I've always had a view to the scholarly aspect of there is more to learn. So this idea of reading, I mean, this is a real bookshelf and they're real books, and I will say that I've read almost all of them, and this idea that that's something I set time myself for myself to do on some regular basis is just continuously read what people are publishing and what they're working on and researching. So that's sort of inherent. I think one of the things that I learned, maybe I wish I had learned it earlier, is this idea of building a strong network and keeping not just internal, to the company that you're working with in your organization, but
Mhm.
leveraging this external network. This idea, like you and I, Laura, met so many years ago, and you were very provocative for us at Kimberly Clark and for me. And I remember leaving one of our first meetings and thinking, God, Scott, there's so much that she knows that I don't know and that this organization doesn't know. And that was one of those times. And Laura, I want to thank you for sparkling this idea of, oh, I need to look outside the company. What's going on at Unilever and Mars and Procter and Gamble and XPO? What are they doing in Europe that we're not leveraging in the United States? How can we build relationships the way they do in Latin America, for example, that seem to stand the test of time? So I do think, having a very active external network, your school and academia with your peers at partner companies, I think all those things are vitally important. And for me, it was that second point that really kind of supercharged, my thinking.
How do you build a network, Scott? I'm I have 340,000 people follow me on LinkedIn, which is amazing, and I give
Mm,
thanks for. But people around me are retiring and changing jobs, and the network is ever evolving. What techniques do you have that help you build an effective network for that voracious learning?
well, I give this advice to people. People ask me that question often, and I will say to them, number one, start with the university system or your academic background. Wherever, uh, whether it came through a community college or a four-year degree or a master's or doctorate degree, that group of people, that cohort, if you will, that you went through that with, is a built-in network. Stay in touch with them. Send them the note. Sometimes on Sunday afternoon, take a few moments and just say, hey, Mary or Bill, I was thinking about you. I really appreciate that time when we were together and we did this thing. How are you? So taking that time. The second thing is, meet your peers outside of your companies. Meet your peers that might be working at non-competes. For Kimberly Clark, it was people like Clorox and Colgate and SCJ, and those, and then meet people in other industries. Through, if you're in the logistics industry, 3PLs and truck lines will be happy to introduce you to some of your peers. Because they want to build that collaboration. So I'd say do that as well. And I would take time out of my schedule and calendar this idea. I'm going to spend some time with Domingo, who just graduated from a master's program and is now in a new vice president role at a big company, and see how he's doing and see if I can help him. Over time that builds up, as you know. I mean, and congratulations, by the way, on all the influence you have, not only have had, but continue to have, and the work that you do. I know that makes a difference in this industry.
Well, thank you. But one of the things that I've found in networking is that people will respond when your goal is to help them, right? If you're networking for a purpose to use them, either to drive sales or to sell something or, push your ideas, the networking doesn't work as well, right? So,
Yeah.
how can you help, right? How can you share?
Yeah, and I think that's right, 100%. And I would say that, to be really authentic about that, you should be talking to your network when you don't need something from them.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, like I don't need you to look at my resume or to place my best friend in a job. I just want to know how you're doing as a human being and if there's anything I can do to help you. So you have to look for those opportunities, as you say.
Well, and I think an important word that you used is authentic. You've always been very authentic, right? And being authentic and, networking even when you're not looking for a job is, I think, really important.
Yeah.
When I left AMR, I sent everyone a personal note on LinkedIn thanking them for helping me in my experience. And, overnight, I grew the network on LinkedIn. But anyway, let's talk
Yes.
about you. When you look back in that 25-year-old self, did you make any failures, stub any toes, have any key learnings
Mm.
from, things that happened on the career path?
Yeah, there's so many, and I think
I have
one of the
broken toes, by the way, Scott,
I the scars are finally healing on my back.
Yeah.
The no, yes, many, and you'll know this from all your experiences, but it certainly is true of my career. The best times for me to in this idea of learning and learning a lot are times when I failed, when the
Right.
effort failed, or I was accountable for something that failed to achieve whatever outcome. And those are the uncomfortable times, of course. I'm share a couple examples. In 2009, we might remember, some of us remember 2009, there was a substantial financial crisis in the United States, and we needed cash. And I mean, you would think, and there's plenty of operating cash, but still fundamentally, all companies were saying, ah. And I was tasked to oversee an effort where we would substantially reduce our inventory position and free up working capital that the company would be investing in some other things. And I had the ear of the CEO and the CFO and the business unit president, and I put together a very aggressive plan to relieve ourselves of some inventory. That plan ultimately was so aggressive that the inventory came out. It's easy to stop producing and keep selling, and our inventory will go down. Of course, very clear planning. But it went down so quickly that our production assets were short cycling and therefore reduced productivity, and our ultimate service to our customers suffered. And it suffered. It took several months to recover our credibility on the commercial side of the business. And certainly, on one hand, we achieved the cash expectations that the CFO and the CEO set, but it took many months for us to return the revenue side of things. And I realized what did I learn? Well, me being aggressive and my team setting aggressive plans certainly pleased the CEO and the CFO, yes. So by their perspective, we were successful. But we undermined our credibility and misunderstood the production capability of the assets in such a way that it took many months to recover. And so I learned that we really need to understand deeply the issues and the connectivities inside of the capabilities of our supply chain before we overcommit ourselves, just to pulling, in this case, inventory out of the system. So it was a tough learning. And for me, myself, I would say that after that, I spent the next two jobs going laterally across the organization to okay, need to learn about sales. I need to learn about customer-facing work, about revenue generation. And anyway, I'll take a pause because it's a long story, but that's one example of a failure that led to my learning.
So, Scott, if you were sitting back in that seat talking to the CEO of Kimberly Clark when you got the message, the whole message to go do that, what would you have done differently?
Yeah, I think I would have been more courageous. Right. Well, that's the second. The first thing is I would have taken more time to better understand the real capability of the production assets and their ability to be able to make the SKU portfolio. I needed to have more data and learn more myself before I did that. Number one. Number two, armed with that data, then I would have been more courageous to drive what would have been a more balanced approach and to put the credibility on the line to say, yes, we understand we need the cash, and yes, we can. At the same time, we do need revenue, and here are some alternative approaches that I believe would be better. And I should have been more courageous and a little bit less starry-eyed in the moment. I'm just going to do whatever this person wants, and instead going, yeah, I hear you, but here's a better approach. That's what I would have done different.
And what would being more courageous have looked like?
Yeah, I think bringing data and insights. Number two, pushing back when it's respectfully, of course, but pushing back in ways that allowed us to find a different outcome, standing, into the breach and looking the CFO and the CEO in the eye and go, yes, I understand the outcome. Here are 2 or 3 better ways to get it. And just in that moment to take that deep breath and say the words that needed to be said.
Yeah. And the right way. The other thing is, in our careers, a lot has changed. Like you talked about your first computer and the diaper plant, right?
Mm.
And that's really hard for a person in school to even fathom that, we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have computers on desk. I remember the portable computer that I first used, it took 3 men and a boy to, get into the cubicle, and we had to sign up for it in hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you think back over your career and you think about, the jobs you had and the changing of technology, what advice would you have for people as they think about the definition of their careers and learning about technology?
Yeah, I would say do. In fact, we talked about this in one of my classes last week. We're about to wrap up finals this week and graduation and all of that. But we talked about this idea that stay ahead of the curve. Personally, make an investment in yourself and in your teams as you get into leadership roles to make sure that they understand how to best use the technology to solve real problems, not the problems that all the salespeople say. You go to any conference and Gartner or Manifest, whatever conference you go to, and there's thousands of people, and AI is all over this idea. But is it solving pragmatic business problems that you actually have? Okay, our deployment schedule is uneven throughout the week. Can we solve that problem using technology? Learn how to do that and apply that. If our inventory deployment, our inventory safety stock calculations are all static, is there an approach to solve that? Yes, there is. Go and solve that. Solve the problems that are actually impacting your P&L in this moment. And so teach yourself and your team how to do that. I don't know about you, Laura, but there's certainly a lot of hype in this space, but practical application is real and is happening, and it's our job to find it. And it's our job to learn enough to be able to solve those problems that are real problems, not the pie in the sky problems. That's in my opinion.
I agree with you. I think we got to stay out of the love of shiny objects and the race for hype, which leads us to the bottom. Well,
Yes.
you've been very kind with your time, Scott. Let's wrap up. Anything I didn't ask you want to tell us?
Yeah, I would say this idea that um, investing in yourself, as a leader, as a human being first. Are you taking time to stay centered and have your more compass right and spend the time with family and friends and in your community? That's vitally important. This whole idea of keeping the your production capacity healthy, investing in your team, giving them time, giving them the capability, experiences, education, and exposures, as you say, to learn the world outside of the 4 walls of your building, and then find a way to return. Laura, you're doing this and you do it every day, but early in your career, you learn stuff and then you earn, you earn money, but you earn credibility and you earn accountability. But then returning to the industry, returning to your alma mater, returning to the people who are behind you on the journey. Hey, they need your help. Lend them a helping hand. That's how I'd wrap up. I think that's a good way to think about it. Learn, earn, and return.
Learn, earn, and return. Thank you so much for joining the program today, Scott.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Laura.
All the best. And so we wrap up this series with what would I tell my 25-year-old self? with an interview with Scott, and we look forward to more interviews in the next coming weeks. Thank you very much.